Hello, we're back with the captain's dog. January 12th, 1805. We brought in the new year by taking a large group of men to the first Mandan village for dancing and merriment. A good time was had by all. We enjoyed our time among the Mandans, but after a few weeks the men were already talking about proceeding on, hoping it would be in early spring. I was eager to leave as well. I'd gotten used to wandering and discovering new sights and smells. The fort was secure and comfortable, but also confining. I spent a good part of each day roaming through the Mandan village or out hunting with Joulard. Captain Lewis spent most days inside the fort, working on his notes and preparing his collection, which would be sent back with the French voyageurs in the spring. As winter progressed, food became scarce. Our excuse me. Our hunters often came back hungry and frostbitten, without a scrap of meat to show for their efforts. The captain started doctoring the Indians in exchange for meat and produce. They treated wounds, colds, rheumatism, bad teeth, frostbite, and a number of other ailments. The word spread, and every morning a dozen Indians lined up outside the captain's huts, each with an armful of food, to wait their turn for the white medicine. A second business was set up using the forge and the blacksmith and gunsmith skills of Private John Shields. The Indians brought in hoes that needed mending, axes that needed sharpening, and broken rifles. Eventually, there wasn't a broken hoe in any of the Mandan and Hidatsa lodges. The axes were all sharpened, and the Indians' rifles were as good as new. Business dropped off. The captains remedied this by helping Shields design a battle axe, an item that, because so popular, he and the men that had been helping him could barely keep up with demand. I thought Shields' axe business was a little odd. On the one hand, the captains were telling the Indians to stop warring with one another. On the other hand, they were making battle axes that the Indians would certainly use in raids. One day, a Hidatsa war chief stopped by on his way to pick up a battle axe at the forge. He asked permission to raid the Sioux and Arikaras when the weather broke in spring. He got the axe, but was told not to use it, which I could see made no sense to him. Next, February 11, 1805. So we're coming to the end of winter. Sacagawea began her labor today. Captain Clark and I are tending to her, but the birth is taking an inordinate amount of time. I've grown very fond of her since she and her husband moved into the fort with us. So we were right. She gave birth while they were staying over. So they weren't actually on the trail. They were staying at their fort. So we know who's the next character that's showing up. Jean-Baptiste. The captain wasn't alone in his feelings for Bird Woman. Soon after she and Charbonneau moved into the fort, she announced she was pregnant. There was some heated debate among the men about the wisdom of her joining our tribe. They thought a woman with a child would be too much of a burden. But as they got to know her, the subject began to fade. There was something about her quiet shyness that appealed to all the men, and by the time she gave birth, they were looking forward to having a human pup on the journey. Bird Woman spent many evenings picking burrs out of my fur, and from time to time she slipped me a dead mouse, because she knew I loved them. These two acts of kindness were more than enough to endear her to me forever. Bird Woman's labor was long. The captains fretted over her as if they were the expectant fathers, not Charbonneau. After a time, René Jalmon, one of the French traders living with the Mandans, suggested to Captain Lewis that he feed her a bit of rattlesnake rattle to hurry the labor along. It works every time, René insisted. Medicine was really different back then. So to make the birth go faster, they're going to give her some rattlesnake rattle, which, I don't know, maybe it does work. Captain Lewis was doubtful, but he was getting desperate. He broke up a bit of rattlesnake rattle, put it into a cup of water, and offered it to her. Sure enough, a few minutes later she drank the mixture down. Our tribe had a new member. They named the pup Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau, but Captain Clark called him Pomp, which is the name that seemed to stick. About a month after Pomp was born, Charbonneau and his family got kicked out of the fort. The problem began when the captain sat down with Charbonneau to go over his contract, and he became uppity with them. He told the captains he would not perform any camp duties, carry any loads, or stand any guard duty. He also told them that he expected to be free to leave the party at any time, and that they would have to supply him with provisions if he did. This, of course, was unacceptable, and he was asked to leave that very day. The captains were very disappointed at this turn of events, and so were the men. The fort just wasn't the same without Birdwoman and Pump. The men missed making faces and uttering odd guttural sounds at her pup. I missed them too. A few days after their departure, I crossed the frozen river to the Mandan village where they were staying to see how they were doing. Long before I reached the village, I heard Birdwoman's voice, but she sounded more like an angry bear than a bird. She was calling her husband bad names in Shoshone and Hidatsa. As best I could figure out, Birdwoman wanted to go home to her family below the big mountains, and could not believe Charbonneau's arrogance had ruined the chance to go on the trip. I did not hear Charbonneau say a single word all during this. The conversation was one-sided. I thought maybe there was something wrong. The buffalo hide door of the lodge flew open, and he stumbled outside in a daze, with Birdwoman still shouting at him. Charbonneau found Tabot and begged him to go over to the fort and talk to the captains on his behalf. He told Tabot that he would do anything the captains asked if they would just let him and Birdwoman go back with them. Tabot crossed over to the fort and argued the case. The captains let Charbonneau stew for a few more days in Birdwoman's wrath, but they finally gave in and hired him back. So Sacagawea is a teenager who just had a little baby, and her husband is much older. I think he's in his 30s. Might be wrong about that, but he's much older. And he was saying that he wanted to be able to do whatever he wanted and have no rules for him or jobs like all the other men on the trip. And Lewis and Clark said, no way, we can't do that. You have to help too. So they kicked him out. And Sacagawea,